Good Tuesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Hope you're having a great weekend. Thanks for joining us. A great afternoon. Thinking ahead a little bit to the weekend. Sam Monson, Pro Football Focus, talking about the Browns' projected win total, which is 8.5.
Tell us why you're taking the over 8.5 here.
Definitely taking the over, and for not the same reasons that we've been saying. I'm saying, look, an elite level quarterback gets you to 10 wins. Write it in stone, and then the rest of the roster is going to get you the rest. The Browns have the opposite problem, where they might have the best roster in the NFL, but a quarterback who, in Deshaun Watson, has shown no ability to be an elite quarterback since he's arrived in Cleveland. So to me, this is a 10-win team if Watson plays even average football this year. The roster is that good. If he gets anywhere approaching his better play, they're like a legitimate Super Bowl contender. I just love every aspect of this roster. Really good offensive line. Okay, we don't know what Nick Chubb is going to be coming back off that devastating injury, but I think they've got good contingency there, both in the players that were there before, bringing in Deontay Foreman just in case, as a sort of heavier bell cow type of running back. The defense was phenomenal last year. I think they've done a good job of retaining and adding talent there. I just think this team's phenomenal, with the one question mark being, how good is Deshaun Watson going to play?
With that, let's welcome in Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Mary Kay, it seems like every time we do this, we have to say, yeah, but it's because he's been injured. You can't separate the injuries from the way Deshaun Watson has played quarterback. They're kind of tied together.
You really can't, and that's why it's just so funny to me to see people from the outside trying to get a handle on this football team and trying to describe what they think might happen and what Deshaun is all about. Nobody ever takes into consideration the fact that he played potentially most of last season with a fractured shoulder. If not most of the season, then at least part of the season with a fractured shoulder. The way that he came off that out of the locker room against the Baltimore Ravens with a high ankle sprain and a fractured shoulder and pulled out that game, if that isn't showing any signs of elite quarterback play, then I don't really know what is. I just think that, once again, he's still paying the price for his off the field transgressions, and people don't want to give him the benefit of the doubt, right or wrong. I'm just saying that that's what it is. People do not want to think that maybe Deshaun Watson can still be a good quarterback. And I think he has the potential to surprise a lot of people this season if he remains healthy. And that is the whole 100% key here, is that he's got to be healthy. And the Browns haven't seen him healthy yet. And when they did see him somewhat healthy coming off of the 11-game suspension 2 years ago, that just that was kind of putting everyone behind the 8 ball. And it really wasn't a good gauge of what he's going to be all about. I don't think he's forgotten how to play football. And as long as the shoulder allows, I think he'll be very good.
So this is from one of your Hey Mary Kays. Based on what you know, assuming no major injuries, which that's always a kind of tricky assumption, what's a reasonable win total for the Browns, given they have one of the toughest schedules in the NFL?
And, that's another thing. As I was listening to PFF talk about that, the other thing that occurred to me was when they were talking about, this defense is just amazing. It's the best in the NFL and all of those kinds of things. It is a really, really good defense. And maybe it will carry over to this season and they will still be the number one defense in the NFL. But it's a whole new ball game for that defense this year with the quarterbacks that they're going to be facing. And I've talked about it over and over and over again, because I don't think anyone can rest on their laurels. I think everyone needs to elevate their game. I think that Jim Schwartz needs to pick up his game. I think Jacques Césaire needs to bring some new things to the defensive line. And that is because they are playing just an unbelievable lineup of quarterbacks this year, providing those guys stay healthy. And the quarterbacks that they didn't face last year were, Aaron Rodgers, a healthy Joe Burrow, Joe Burrow in the second game. The list goes on and on. They didn't even face Anthony Richardson. They didn't face, I can't remember half of them anymore. They didn't face Kyler Murray. So they played a lot of backup guys. They did not have anything close to what they'll have this year. Having said all that, I still think they can go out and win 11 games this season if they don't have the major injuries they suffered last year.
So another thing that you have to at least pay attention to is the Amari Cooper contract situation. I know you wrote an article what Amari Cooper's fellow 30-plus-year-old receivers are making contract-wise. So and you kind of go through it. Tyreek Hill's 30 years old; he's getting $30 million a year. Devontae Adams 31, $28 million. Cooper Kupp, wow, that. It snuck up on me that he's 31. He's making $26.7 million. Calvin Ridley, 30 years old, $23 million. Stephon Diggs, 30 years old, $22.52 million. Mike Evans, turning 31 in August, $20.5 million. Keenan Allen is 32. He's making $20.25 million. Then Cooper making $20 million, tied with Chris Godwin at $28 million, both making $20 million a year. When you look at that, is there kind of a sweet spot that you think gets Amari Cooper into training camp and that the Browns can live with?
Well, first of all, I was kind of surprised when I dug in there and did my diligence on the ages of some of these receivers and what they were making. And 38% of the receivers in the top 20 or 21 of the highest paid receivers list, 38% are 30 years or older, except for Calvin Ridley will be turning 30 in December. So they're getting paid. Those 30-year-olds are getting paid and getting paid recently because Calvin Ridley and Mike Evans both got contract extensions this offseason, and they're both around 30, 31. So that I thought was interesting. And then you go into the receiving yards, and I also have that in the story. You go into the receiving yards and you see that I think it's 33% of the top 21 in receiving yards are 30 or older. So this is a situation where these receivers are not necessarily falling off of a cliff at the age of 30. And that's why I think that Amari Cooper still has a good case to make some decent money. Now, it just depends on what the Browns want to do and how they want to do it. The key issue, I think, for Amari, or at least one of the key issues, is the fact that he has no guaranteed money left heading into this season, and he's got no security in the event of injury. So at the very least, the Browns could restructure his contract, give him a nice upfront bonus, lower the base salary to a very manageable cap-friendly number, and then spread out the bonus over a couple of void years if you only want to deal with this for one more season through 2024. So that's one way to go about it. Another way to go about it would be to extend him for another year so that you'd have a 2-year contract. I would think somewhere in the $26 million range. That number just comes to my mind. If you don't want to go that high, then I would give him incentives to reach that amount or even exceed that amount via yards, touchdowns, Pro Bowl, Super Bowl. There's all different kinds of things that you could do. Once again, give him good upfront bonus money, spread it out over a couple of years, and have everybody go home feeling good about this deal.
All right, so let's take the other side of it. Say for whatever reason, they can't come to an agreement. Do you think it makes sense for the Browns to look to potentially make a trade with Brandon Aiyuk? That's a guy that's going to want $35 million. He's going to want to be paid among the top in the league because he's 26 years old.
Yes, everyone keeps asking me about that. So many questions that I've gotten for Hey MK answers have been about that possible trade. I answered this the other day in my Hey MKs. And at this point, I don't see that being likely because, as you mentioned, the Browns would have to pay him somewhere between $30 and $35 million a year, which is now the going rate for those top-notch receivers. And the 49ers don't necessarily want to pay it, but in the end, they are in their Super Bowl window, and they might not want to let him go. They just might not want to let him walk unless they get an offer that they cannot refuse. So from that standpoint, it seems very unlikely, I think. And then the 49ers would have to take on Amari Cooper and pay him more than what he's getting right now, which is an average of $20 million. And he's 30 years old. So we'll have to see how it works out. But I think both teams will probably end up paying their own guy instead of taking on somebody else's problem. So I think that's probably ultimately how it will work out, but you never really know. Somebody might come after Brandon Aiyuk and be willing to give the 49ers something pretty good for him.
All right, before we go to break, another one of your Hey Mary case. Assuming, again, this is a pretty big assumption, all of the tackles are healthy, who do you think the starting tackles are on the offensive line?
I think they're going to start out with Jed Wills on the left side and DeWand Jones on the right side. Now, we have not seen that yet. We haven't seen Jed Wills practicing yet because he's coming off surgery to repair his torn MCL, and he's just not ready to be out there yet. Jack Conklin is also not practicing yet. So it's a little bit of a mystery heading into camp, who's going to be ready to go and when. But I think if they're all healthy in the early going, I think they'll stick with Jed and DeWand and see how those guys do, and give Jack a little bit more time to heal. He had the dual surgery, torn ACL, torn MCL, and I think he needs a little bit more time. So we'll have to see how that goes. In the event that they're all healthy somewhere down the road, then I think they'll go with the two best guys at the time, because that's the most important thing. But I think that they probably don't want to upset the apple cart and upset the timing on the line. So I don't know. I just have a feeling that they might want to stick with Jed and DeWand for as long as they can. But this is up in the air. They have a whole new offensive line coach, and they've got 3 guys coming off of knee surgeries, and it's a little bit up in the air.
Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
We continue talking Browns with Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, folks. Last year, our defense had some issues defending quarterbacks that could run the football. Our first 6 games, I just looked, all these teams feature quarterbacks that can take off and run if necessary for first downs. And based on last year, we did get hurt in the red zone by athletic quarterbacks for some TDs. Later in the season, we play Lamar Jackson twice, then Pittsburgh twice, with 2 notable running quarterbacks. Russell Wilson killed us on the ground in Denver, and Justin Fields runs like a running back. Is Jim Schwartz doing enough to improve in this area, and does he have the personnel this season to make it happen for this apparent weakness? Go Browns!
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Mary Kay, this is one of the things you kind of alluded to in the first segment. They're going to get a bunch of quarterbacks that are really talented.
I say this a lot, and again, I know that I sound like I've been harping on this, but I think it's important to note, because if you believe your own rankings from last season, I think you're going to be in trouble this year. Again, I think they have an amazing defense. I think they've got a great scheme. They've got a really great coordinator, but they're all going to have to do more. Think about this. They faced Case Keenum instead of CJ Stroud. They faced Gardner Minshew, although he was very good, instead of Anthony Richardson. Clayton Tune instead of Kyler Murray. Jake Browning instead of Joe Burrow in the final game. Trevor Siemian instead of Aaron Rodgers. Joe Burrow in the first week coming off of a calf injury. And then they faced Trevor Lawrence coming off of a very gruesome high ankle sprain. These are just, these are most of them, but, to name a few, these are some easier breaks that they got last year that they might not get this year unless they see a bunch of injuries at quarterback as they go through the season. Heading into the year, they really have that formidable lineup, and they have to be ready for it. And when our texter or our emailer there was talking about the running quarterbacks, yes, they're really, really good dual threat quarterbacks on the schedule this season that are going to give the Browns everything that they've got, and they have to be ready for this. They have to be ready, and I think that they will be, but this is something that, that they just cannot take it lightly and think, oh, geez, we were the number one defense in the NFL last year, because they did not see anything like they are going to see, including these dual threat quarterbacks that can get away from the pressure that you're going to be trying to apply. And of course, you can't get away from everybody, especially if you have good middle pressure like they will this year with Mike Hall and Quentin Jefferson, and then great pressure on the outsides as well. You've got to be able to somehow get the ball out or run away or do something. So we'll have to see how teams are going to play the Cleveland Browns with their ferocious pass rush that they have. It's going to be challenging for offensive coordinators to figure out how to do it. But by the same token, the Browns are going to have to be ready for what they're going to see every single week.
So when you think of mobile quarterbacks, a guy that comes to mind defensively is Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. This is from Athlon Sports. Why the Browns should re-sign Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah now. Getting second contracts done early has become a new trend in the NFL recently, with the competitive nature of the markets at each position where players look to get a bigger deal than the other. Proves beneficial to be a tone setter rather than merely keeping pace. As I read that, Mary Kay, and I'm just reading it for the first time now, truth be told, Andrew Berry has done that since he's been here. So is this kind of another instance of, do you think they try to get ahead of the market at linebacker with JOK? If you let him go out and play like he did again, he may get a bigger contract at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, usually Andrew Berry does get out in front of these things, and it's really not any too early to extend a player who's heading into the final year of his contract. So this would just be a situation of kind of conducting business as usual. JOK, heading into the final year of his contract, you don't want to let it go too far. You definitely want to wrap him up. You know that you want him around long term. You know what the market is going to bear. And so, it's really probably a matter of whether or not he wants to bet on himself a little bit more and see what he can do, or if he's willing to accept a nice, fair market value that I'm sure the Browns will offer him. So that's something that could get done before training camp. It could get done. I don't know if it will get done before training camp, but maybe before the season. If not, then sometime into the season before the trade deadline. But one way or another, they really want to keep JOK around.
So I know you've addressed this on the Orange and Brown Talk podcast that you do with Dan Lobby and Ashley Bastock. Who do you think could be sleeper contributors for the Browns in 2024?
I actually saw a lot of guys. We did a whole podcast on that, as you mentioned, and we saw a number of guys that we felt could be sort of sleeper guys for next year. Now, a lot has been said already this offseason and this mini camp about Cedric Tilman, but he should be noted. He's someone that I think can get some things done this year if he can get targets. Now, if Amari's back and he's out there from day one, and then you've got Jerry Jeudy and you've got Elijah Moore, there might not be as many targets to go around for some of those guys that are a little farther down the food chain, because of course you have to get the ball to David Njoku as well. But he's somebody that I think looks poised and ready to take a step up. I think Tony Fields is in that category. He had a really, really nice mini camp and organized team activities. And he's sort of a JOK light, sort of a poor man's version of a JOK, but the lights are starting to come on for him. So he's somebody to watch. And then from a defensive line standpoint, I would say maybe keep an eye on Isaiah McGuire. I don't know if you can say that Alex Wright is somebody that could sneak up on you, considering that he had 5 sacks last season, which were third on the team. But if he can build on that, I think that would really be helpful for them. And Pierre Strong Jr. is somebody, we didn't mention him on the pod per se, but I think he's someone that is going to play a bigger role this year with Deuce Staley coaching the team than he did last year.
Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, and I are going to take one more time out. Other side of the break, we'll take a look at ESPN.com's ranking of the NFL rosters. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. This is from ESPN.com, ranking the 2024 NFL rosters. Best projected starting lineups. They go 49ers 1, Chiefs 2, Ravens 3. They have the Browns down at 12. Biggest strength, they say edge rusher. Myles Garrett leads that unit, having produced 50-plus pass rush wins, 10-plus sacks in 6 consecutive seasons. Za'Darius Smith returns after posting an outstanding 20.9 pass rush win rate last season. Solid depth via Okunrankwo and Alex Wright. They also say the biggest weakness from the group is running back. Running back room, with Nick Chubb being listed as weakness, seems ludicrous, but the Browns are loaded almost everywhere. Browns running backs not named Chubb averaged 3.8 yards per carry and 4.8 yards per target last season. 12 seems awfully low to me. And again, I know I'm being a little optimistic. They said the biggest X factor, biggest question mark, however you want to put it, was Deshaun Watson. 12 still seems low.
Yeah, that does seem low when you look at how this is a pretty loaded roster. And even when you look at those running backs, once again, I do think that Deuce Staley will help elevate the play of those guys. I think there's more upside for Jerome Ford. I think he will do better being coached by his new running backs coach, Deuce Staley. Again, as I mentioned, I think you'll see some good things out of Pierre Strong. And then Dante Foreman, he looked really good, and he will replace, for all intents and purposes, the Kareem Hunt roles. So they're looking pretty good there. They also have Naheem Hines. I think the running game will be good. I don't see very many weaknesses on this team. And again, as long as Deshaun is healthy, I think he should be the Deshaun of old. And I think he's in a new system, but it's a sort of a new old system for him. It's what he ran in Houston under Bill O'Brien. I think he feels very comfortable in it. And I do think that that he should excel this season as long as the shoulder will allow.
To me, it seems like the additions of Quentin Jefferson and Michael Hall might have even upgraded that line. And I thought the line was pretty good, but I think they made the defensive tackles even a little stronger.
They definitely did, and that's why they went out and they got those two guys to bring that middle push, to bring sacks and pressures from up the middle. That's what they were going for there. And if it works out the way they want to, that should help everyone on the whole entire line, including Myles Garrett. So Quentin Jefferson had 6 sacks last year from the interior position. That's pretty darn good. And they see really good things from Mike Hall. So if it works out the way they want to, it should be even more formidable of a defensive line this year, and it's going to need to be.
So this is from the Bleacher Report. Most overlooked addition of the NFL offseason, and they say for the Browns it's Deonta Foreman. Pairing Foreman with Ford should give Cleveland a capable backfield tandem on which to lean until Chubb's return. After signing a 1-year, $1.3 million contract this offseason, Foreman might not have a long-term future in Cleveland, but he's likely to be a key contributor in 2024 with Chubb on the mend. I agree with that, and that's kind of one of the reasons I think the biggest weakness of the running back room that we talked about before, I don't necessarily agree with that. Foreman is a very competent NFL running back when given the ball.
He is. He really is. And people just don't know him here. So they don't really know what to expect. And I think everyone has their sights set on just, Nick Chubb. That's what people are used to. And it's hard to imagine that running back by committee is going to be very good. But what you have to remember is this is an amazing run blocking offensive line. And when you have a line like that, it's not as hard as it is on some other teams to go out there and rush for 100 yards per game. So I think they're going to be okay. And again, I really do think that Jerome is going to step it up this year. I think that Deuce is working him really hard. He's coaching him hard. I think he'll bring out the best in Jerome. And I think he has the potential for a 1,000-yard season.
This is from A to Z Sports. Biggest offseason mistakes for the Browns. Mistake, I would put that in quotes. They say not signing or drafting a pass-catching tight end behind David Njoku. The Browns will be relying on Jordan Akins to be second tight end. After Akins, they have Zaire Mitchell-Payton trying to crack the roster if Njoku was to go down with an injury. Browns would be in a terrible spot with Akins leading the room. When you look at biggest offseason addition you wish they would have made, maybe that's a better way to say it than mistake. When you look at it as tight end or I think I know what your answer is. What do you think they should have added?
Well, I really think that I was looking for them to add another pass rusher who could get an edge rusher who could get double-digit sacks, but they're going more by committee in that regard. I think if they can get 7 out of Alex and 7 out of Obo and 7 out of Z, that I think they feel pretty good about that. They just want some combination of 20-something from those edge rushers. So I think that, they feel like they're going to be okay there. As far as the tight end position is concerned, they're not going to be running, I don't think, as many 2 tight end sets as they have in the past, or as many 3 tight end sets as they have in the past. This is a new offense, a new vibe, a new philosophy. There will be more 3 wides, more 4 wides, more of a spread vibe or concept. And so as long as David can stay healthy, they should be okay. And I think they will also keep their eyes peeled for other tight ends as they go through the offseason. I mean, go through the preseason and get through those final cuts. They might add another tight end.
This is one of your Hey Mary Kays. Is Deshaun Watson ahead of schedule in his rehab?
Actually, he is ahead of schedule in his rehab. And I thought that's what I was looking at when I was looking out there and watching him at minicamp. I didn't expect him to be throwing the ball quite as hard as he was, quite as far as he did. And lo and behold, Kevin Stefanski wasn't willing to say that at minicamp, but Andrew Berry went on NFL Network and he did say that he's ahead of schedule in his rehab. So I thought that was pretty significant. It was, it was evident to us, all the reporters that were out there watching, that he seemed to be that. But to hear Andrew say it, I thought that was really meaningful. And I think it bodes well for Deshaun Watson heading into camp.
All right, before I let you go, this is from one of the Orange and Brown Talk podcasts. Do you think choice routes make the Browns' offense more complicated, and why didn't the Browns implement them in Kevin Stefanski's offense?
Well, I think that the reason why they didn't is because that was not really his forte. That's not something that he ran a lot or worked with a lot. And I know that he probably was looking to incorporate some of that, but he wasn't able to do some of the things that he wanted to do last year because Deshaun Watson got hurt. And that kind of threw a monkey wrench into everybody's plans. So who knows if he would have had more of that in his own arsenal. But I do think that obviously it's something that Ken Dorsey is very well versed in. And he is implementing all of that. And I do think there will be a learning curve. There will be a learning curve, but maybe it'll be a quick learning curve. They'll find guys that feel really comfortable doing it. And Deshaun feels comfortable doing that and throwing those routes because that's what he did in Houston. So I don't think it will be a horrible transition.
When I think of, we've talked about, and you've said a number of times, this is going to be very similar to the offense Deshaun ran in Houston under Bill O'Brien. When I think of Deshaun Watson, I see a guy that got to the line of scrimmage, processed information, and seemed to make really good decisions throughout the entire game. Is that an accurate read of what Deshaun Watson is in this system that the Browns are going to implement?
Yeah, and they let him kind of play a little bit of that backyard ball that you see Patrick Mahomes play. They allowed him free reign to improvise, to go out and to be the playmaker that he is. And that's what he's excited about. And the receivers have an opportunity to kind of play street ball a little bit too, where they can just run out there and and do what they do best and get the ball in their hands and get yards after catch. But certainly I think that Deshaun Watson can run the show. They're willing to put that on his plate, and that's what he has wanted. And he's getting it this year. Now he just has to live up to what he's asked for.
Mary Kay Cabot, Browns beat reporter for the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, as always. Great stuff. Thanks so much for the time and the insight, Mary Kay. Appreciate it very much.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Mary Kay Cabot. Make sure you check her out. Great Browns coverage, pages of the Plain Dealer, as well as cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report, straight ahead. Stay with us on Sports for CLE. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. This from Emmanuel Acho, FS1 Speak, what he expects to see from Deshaun Watson on the field in 2024.
There's two ways that quarterbacks can succeed in the NFL. Either your team does well or you do well. I do not see a 4,900, 5,000 yard passing Deshaun, but his best career in Houston was 11-5. I do see 11-6. Deshaun in Cleveland. I do see the best version as it pertains to winning in Cleveland, because last year Deshaun Watson was 5-1 as a starter. He's 8-4 as a starter in his duration in Cleveland. So for as bad as he has been in comparison to old versions of Deshaun, and as bad as he has been depending on what statistics you want to pull from Deshaun, the Cleveland Browns were still winning. Now, he might have gone along for the ride as opposed to being the conductor for the ride, but when push comes to shove, they were still winning. So the best version of Deshaun is 11-5. I think Deshaun can help command and help lead the Browns to 11 wins. I think he can help command and lead them to 10 wins. He can help command and lead them to 12 wins, because last year before his departure, they were 5-1. Albeit he left some games, he entered some games, but they were still winning.
With that, let's welcome in Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. And Fred, I use that to set up. You did a look ahead at quarterback position and kind of statistical projections on the Orange and Brown Report. You did an article. Take us through how you did that and where you arrived at it. So 4,200 yards, 31 touchdowns, 12 interceptions, another 400 yards rushing and 4 more touchdowns, which would be as good as anybody. I think the best, actually, in franchise history.
Yeah, you had to go right there, didn't you? You know, I like that statistic because I cover Brian Sipe, and it's hard to believe that the Browns have not had a quarterback throw for 30 touchdowns in their, since 1980, when Sipe did that, in the Red Right 88 year. So if you look at, especially with a 17-game schedule now, that's not really setting the world on fire. I think that's not even 2 touchdown passes a game, about 1.8, I think. And so just to be clever, be fun, that's why I put Watson there. To be honest, last year, I kind of expected him to have those type of numbers, and we know that he didn't play and he was injured. I just think, and I've been saying it, on your show and any other place I'm talking, is he just needs to stay on the field. If he plays 16, 17 games in the regular season, I don't think that he has to have eye-popping numbers, and I don't think anybody would say it's an eye-popping number to have less than 2 touchdown passes a game. and if he did that, he probably would end up with 30 or more touchdowns, and he would probably, throw for close to 4,000 yards, which are, basically franchise records. So, I've said that Watson does not have to be elite or even top 12 for the Browns to get to the playoffs, kind of like what Emmanuel Acho said. But for them to go deep and to win the Super Bowl or go deep in the playoffs, he's going to have to play, near the top of the league, probably top 12, if not top 10. You look at the final four teams last year, Dave, all of them had their franchise quarterback on the field for the, in those games. And it's pretty obvious if you look at Joe Burrow and what happened to the Bengals, and and you can say it about Lamar Jackson the 2 years before that. He needs to be on the field, and he doesn't have to do it all himself. I think Joe Flacco, no disrespect to him, but he played very well, but he was kind of dropped into a great situation. And I think Watson has the playmakers. He doesn't have to do it himself. Sometimes I think he tries to do too much himself and forces things. And hopefully he learned in that comeback win over the Ravens when he was injured that he was just dinking and dunking and moving the chain. So that's where I had that based on. He's going to have to be on the field the whole year to put up those type of numbers. But I think it's very plausible.
Yeah, two things come to mind. He didn't have a lot around him when he threw for all those. I think the year he threw for the 4,800 yards, I think they had 4 wins. So he's used to being the guy that doesn't have a lot around him and has to do that. I think hopefully it clicked with him. The other thing is, think about how much the league has changed since 1980, and especially relative to throwing the football and how often you throw the football and how deep you throw the football. And the Browns' season career mark for highest passing was back in the 1980s. That just shows you how real the struggle to find an elite quarterback has been for this franchise.
Yeah, and it was the cardiac kid era, and they got that name because they were always coming from behind, and you have to throw the ball. And the Browns, I think are going to be a little more of a pass-first offense. I thought maybe they were going to do that last year, but I definitely think they are going to under Ken Dorsey, and with Nick Chubb coming along, not sure if he'll be ready to start the season. I just think that's what it's setting up, and I just think that, like you said, now the emphasis is on passing. Back then when Sight played, you passed if you got behind. And I just think that it plays into the hand here. And I just think there's so much national negativity about Deshaun Watson. I just think under the radar, he really needs it, for himself to stay on the field, to play and put up decent numbers, and then I think that really sets the Browns up in good shape, because their roster, what's funny, you look around, you see at this time of the year, because it's slow, everybody's putting out their projections, their list on the best rosters, and I haven't found any that didn't have the Browns outside the top 5, and yet they rank Watson every time in the quarterback things in the 20s, so that tells you, if you have any type of quarterback play, even middle of the road, I think, you're like he said, going to have 11 wins and make it to the playoffs. So, that's what I just think they have to keep their eye on. And you want him to get better and better, gain his confidence and his rhythm. So the second half of the season, playoffs, is when he's playing his best.
Yeah, I'm with you. If he's on the field, I think he has a big year without question. You wrote another article. Don't be surprised if this up-and-coming wide receiver makes a big impact for the Browns in 2024. And it's a guy that really showed out during minicamp, Cedric Tilman. Take us through that, what you saw from him and kind of the thought behind that article.
Well, I right after the minicamp, I think on Thursday, we talked to Kevin Stefanski, I left and my family were on vacation a week, and I didn't get a chance to get the story. But I asked Stefanski, my last question before the break, the summer break, was about Cedric Tillman, and he was just effusive in praising him and almost wanted to get it out, and glad somebody asked about him, because he said, he'd been at every practice, he'd done everything, and it was like he was prepared to how proud he was of Cedric Tillman. Chad O'Shea, the passing coordinator and wide receivers coach, also had a lot of good things to say. That story we put up on the OBR.com today, so you can read it there. But I talked to a source close to the organization who really feels he can be, at least the 4 receiver and maybe even the 3 receiver this year. And that's big because you're going to have Amari Cooper back and Jerry Jeudy you traded for, and you got Elijah Moore. But all 3 of them are, well, not all 3 of them. Cooper's contract is still in process, and Moore's a free agent. So I think they really want Tilman to take a step, and I think, that could go a long way in what they do after the season. If they re-sign Elijah Moore or re-sign Amari Cooper, longer or whatever, I think Tilman is big in their plans. They've drafted a lot of wide receivers, I think 1 every year under Andrew Berry, and 3 third-round pick wide receivers in a row. But I think this is the best of the 3. And I really think, in the little I saw last year, and then what I saw in the off-season program, they really like him. He got a chance to run with the first team because Cooper and Jeudy weren't there often. And I really think he made a lot of plays. We'll see what happens in training camp, but he's big. He can go up and get the ball. And I think in a spread offense, he could be an under-the-radar guy, even as the 4 receiver, when they're worried about Cooper, Jeudy, Moore, Njoku. You slide him, and I think he could have a big year.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report. Now I'm going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll talk a little defense, including Jim Schwartz, mic'd up. Sports for CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Moneymaker from the Ohio Lottery has no interest in beating around the bush. Money Maker. You play the game, you could win money. Up to $2 million. With more than $88 million in prizes from $50 to $500. Moneymaker cuts right to the cash. Unlike this guy.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report. This one is from the Browns. They had a mic on defensive coordinator Jim Schwartz as he's talking to his defense at mandatory minicamp.
Hide, you bought the California weather today. Nice. Prime time. Hey, look, let's make all these look the same. Let's make all these look the same, safeties. Let's work hard at this. Eyes. Gotta go. Oh, there it is. There it is! Curl, sit right there, sit right there. Good. Fast. Oh, there's a thug waiting to happen. Gotta go. Good. Love that look. There it is, fast. Nope, no, not so fast.
And Fred, it's kind of interesting. You get an idea of the energy that he brings, and it is infectious without question.
Yeah, he's fun, to hear, and and they play a little bit when they know the mic's on there too. But that's him. He's intense. The guys like playing for him. He has them celebrating him even in practice. I saw, Bookie Watson, the rookie from Mississippi State, had an interception in the end zone. He was clearly touched down for a touchback. But he ran 100 yards, and the entire team ran the whole length of the field, and and Schwartz was right there leading the charge. So, that's fun, and that keeps those guys excited and wanting to play. And 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 they have success. They believe in what Jim Schwartz is preaching.
So this is kind of interesting. So Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, great season a year ago. In fact, the only player from 2023 with 95-plus tackles and 20-plus tackles for loss. That's because most of the guys with 20-plus TFLs were edge rushers who do not have the ability to make plays in space like JOK does. That just kind of goes to show you how Jim Schwartz figured out how to use them. Do you think they get a new contract done? Is that one of the priorities? Get that contract with JOK done?
Oh yeah, I mean, here's a guy who had a breakout season and showed everything that they imagined when they traded up in the second round to get him, in that draft out of Notre Dame. His first 2 years under Joe Woods, he played tentative, whether it was him learning the system or thinking too much. He was, he had 3 tackles for loss his first year. He had 7 the second year. And then he had 20, last year. So he's got 30 tackles for loss, but 20, last year alone. And so this is what you dream about when you draft a guy, is they develop. And now you get him to the point where he had a breakout season, and he should only be getting better, where he's at. So I don't know when that'll get done, but, being a second round pick, he's in the last year of the rookie contract. I think if you look at Grant Delpit last year, like late in the year, actually he got hurt, but they signed him to an extension, in the last couple of weeks of the season. I don't think JOK gets to free agency. I just don't know when it'll get done, but he's got to be at the top of the list, because this isn't like a 30-something guy. This is, your up and coming, defensive star. And I mean, there were times, especially even in the playoff game, when he was just like a missile shooting through. If you look at some of the highlights, like when they would throw a little screen pass, it was like he was full speed and dropping the guy in the backfield. He'd blitz, he'd sack the quarterback, he'd smell out the run and go make the tackle. And I think that's what a strong defensive line, especially interior defensive tackles, does for you. It lets a guy like him, who's a little undersized but has the speed, to kind of be a seek heating missile and just see the ball and go get the ball and not think about it. Jim Schwartz unlocked his potential, and I think that's just the beginning, because he didn't play every down last year until somewhere mid-season. I remember in our session with Schwartz, somebody asked about him, and Schwartz said, it's time for him to be out there on every down. And, he proved it. And, this is Andrew Berry has made a lot of good moves. A lot of them have been in free agency and trades, and maybe not so many in the draft. This is one draft pick that has really come on. He's not letting him go anywhere.
All right, this defensive line rankings from Pro Football Focus for 2024. They go Jets 1, Niners 2, Eagles 3, Lions 4, Browns 5. Browns did some work to put help around Myles Garrett last offseason and will expect the group to cook again in 2024. Depth for this group is solid. Their ceiling is even higher if some of the rotational young players can make an impact. I think the line got better with what they did with Michael Hall and Quentin Jefferson and bringing the guys back, and you got Alex Wright in another year. 5 might be low. I don't know that there's another defensive line I would take over the Browns if you said pick one.
Yeah, I haven't really studied the other ones, but I know Quentin Jefferson, if he would have been on the Browns last year, he would have been their second leading sack man. He had 6 with the Jets, and the Browns behind Garrett, 5.5 was the number 2 guy. So, if you get that from the inside, the Browns lost Jordan Elliott, but they brought back probably the 2 best in Shelby Harris and Maurice Hurst. And then you added Quentin Jefferson, who who might even be, the best pass rusher of the group. And then Mike Hall, who they're really going to be able to, if he picks it up, they're going to put him in isolated situations over the center, where he's going to have to just beat the center one-on-one, because I believe Jim Schwartz is going to put him in situations to force the opposing team, to double team Garrett or Tomlinson or Zadarius Smith or Jefferson or any number of those guys, and find unique pass rushing situations for Hall. His weakness was getting double teamed, and I think that other teams aren't going to be able to double team him. So I think you're going to be able to run a waves of defensive linemen, obviously, if they stay healthy, but you're much deeper than you were last year, especially on the inside. And I think with Alex Wright coming on and Isaiah McGuire, I think that you got 5 pretty good defensive ends as well.
So before we go to break, you wrote an article. Did the Browns find a key contributor in a former top 10 draft choice? And you're referring to Devin Bush. Take us through that article and kind of what you found in that one.
Well, Andrew Berry likes to take and kind of reclamation projects. The first year he was here, he signed Carl Joseph, a safety who was a former number 1 pick with the Raiders. And, he continually seems to bring in guys like Maurice Hurst, different guys that he evaluated highly coming out of the draft. And I think this is a guy, Devin Bush was a top 10 pick. The Steelers traded from 20 all the way up to 10 to get Bush. As a rookie linebacker, he finished 3rd in Rookie of the Year voting with the Steelers. And then in the second year, he tore his ACL, and he really hasn't been the player since. The Steelers didn't pick up his 5th-year option, so he went to the Seahawks as a free agent last year, started a couple games, played a little bit, but then again, it was a 1-year deal, so the Browns signed him on a 1-year. It's a prove-it deal, probably special teams. But my point was, if this guy can, maybe now it takes a little time for people to recover with those knee injuries, and he now, is afforded a couple years. So maybe lightning in a bottle, maybe they could get something like they got with Maurice Hurst or some of the guys that they have taken a flyer on. And if not, they don't have a whole lot invested in him. 1 year, I think it's maybe veteran minimum. So if you could get a top 10, potential Rookie of the Year candidate and get him back to some semblance, that's one area that the Browns are thin, at least on paper, at linebacker. You have JOK and Jordan Hicks, but then you have Tony Fields, Mohamed Diabate from last year. You drafted Bookie Watson, and you have Devin Bush. So Bush and Hicks are the replacements for Sion Taki and Anthony Walker. So taking a flyer there, and they put him up to the podium to talk to the media. So that tells they didn't put a lot of people up there. So that tells me they have high hopes for him and what they've seen in the offseason.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report. Now, I'm going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break. 3 players with the most to gain for the Browns in training camp. That's straight ahead on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Fred Greetham, senior analyst from the Orange and Brown Report. This one from Sam Monson, Pro Football Focus, and the 33rd team. 10 quarterbacks in the best situations for 2024. Brock Purdy, 1. Jared Goff, 2. Jalen Hurts, 3. C.J. Stroud, 4. Cousins and Williams, the rookie, 5 and 6. And Deshaun Watson, number 7. Mahomes, Burrow, and Tua, 8, 9, and 10. Yeah, Fred, we kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. There's a lot around Deshaun Watson. He doesn't have to carry a team like he did in Houston. It's got to be a different feeling and a different mindset for him with all the talent that he has around him.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think maybe a silver lining in last year when he had that comeback win over the Ravens, last game he played, you know, with a broken shoulder and a high ankle sprain. At the time, we didn't know it, but after the game, and I heard him this offseason, I think in his own podcast, say that he learned some things, that he physically wasn't able to do everything with the ankle and the shoulder in that second half, but he didn't want to come out of the game, and he was just relying on his teammates getting the ball out quickly into the playmaker's hands. And hopefully that he takes that with him this year and carries it, is that sometimes, especially quarterbacks, they think they have to be the guy all the time. And there are times definitely that you need, that's why they get paid the big money. But when you have a good roster and good playmakers like the Browns have, with David Njoku and Amari Cooper and Jerry Jeudy and Nick Chubb and the likes of that, you just find ways to get them the ball and don't try to do too much because you don't need to. There's going to be times you're going to have to carry it. So I just really think he's in a good situation. He just needs to be healthy, be on the field, and let his teammates help him out and not try to force things just because he's the quarterback, the franchise quarterback. And it's not the same situation that he was in when he was 4-12 with the Texans the last year.
So this is from Sports Illustrated. It's really interesting. 3 Browns with the most to gain in training camp. We've talked about the first guy, Cedric Tilman. Ended up logging just 21 catches, 224 yards during his rookie campaign. Has already made a great impression, OTAs and mini camp. One thing we learned about him is his rookie season, that guy can block. Speaking of blocking, number 2, DeJuan Jones with Conklin and Wills on the men. Jones could very well be returning to the bench for 2024. Eye-opening showing in training camp could make that decision difficult for Kevin Stefanski. Number 3, Alex Wright with Garrett Smith and Okoronkwo. Browns have quite a quartet of incredibly talented pass rushers on the edge. Wright can separate himself from Okoronkwo, who played in 53% of Cleveland's defensive snaps in 2023. Wright played really well. I don't know that separating himself is what he wants to do. Just continue to develop, because make an impact. You're going to get the ability to rotate in because that's what Jim Schwartz does. Just continue to make plays.
Yeah, he wants to keep them guys fresh, and especially the pass rushers, and so you can throw them out there, and then go full go. I think Wright made tremendous, as a rookie, 3rd-round pick. He had no sacks. I know we emphasize, especially our edge rusher, that, but it takes some time usually for guys for it to click. And behind Zadarius Smith and Myles Garrett and Okoronkwo, I think he really learned some things. If you remember last year in the Hall of Fame game against the Jets, Wright injured his knee and he had to have arthroscopic surgery, and he missed the rest of training camp and really wasn't able to, I don't know when exactly he started playing, but it wasn't right off the bat. So he missed a lot of time. But in the second half of the season, after having no sacks as a rookie, he had 5 sacks in a row, I think, to finish the season. Finished with 5 sacks, had 1 a game, and finished right there, only a half sack behind Zadarius Smith. And so I think that they have a pretty good quartet there, and that allows you to rest guys. And then you have Isaiah McGuire, who they like. Last year, 4th-round pick, was able to sit and observe as well, and he had a sack, in one of the games. So I think they got a good 4, and I think, Okoronkwo is a really good player. They signed him originally, and many thought he was going to be the bookend opposite Garrett, and then they were able to trade for Zadarius Smith. So you have 3 top flight edge rushers, and now 4 with Alex Wright. So I think he has a chance to, just continue his trajectory in the rotation. He's going to get the chances to do so.
The other thing I would say, those guys are all 3rd and 4th round picks. So there's going to be a jump just by virtue of getting used to the NFL. A lot of times, when a guy has a little bit of success, you're like, well, why doesn't he? Guys that are taken in the 3rd and 4th round usually take a little longer to develop.
Yeah, they do. And, the Browns have been drafting, there because of the trade with Watson. And a guy like Emerson, really emerged a little quicker. And, Wright, a lot of times defensive lineman takes a little more time. I've heard that over the years. Siaki Ika, didn't really get on the field last year. He's a 3rd-round pick. It took a little time for David Bell, to start making plays. Cedric Tillman, unfortunately, got hurt after they traded Donovan Peoples-Jones. They were kind of freeing up room for him to play, and he showed some good things, but then he got hurt at the very end of the season, didn't get to play in the playoffs. So that's what you want. You want a team and a roster that's deep, and so you're able to develop your 3rd, 4th round, 5th round picks. So, when you have to let free agents go, you have somebody to step in, and you're now starting to see that with the Browns. They're developing young guys that you might not have heard of that all of a sudden are playing in bigger roles because they have developed them, in the past 3 years.
Fred Greetham, senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report, is always great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Fred.
Welcome. Thanks for having me on.
Fred Greetham, make sure you check him out. He is the senior analyst for the Orange and Brown Report. Always really insightful Browns coverage. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.